Good afternoon. Happy Tuesday. It is May 13th, and yet we are still here in the legislature doing importance of the state, very important work. So we had a vote scheduled this morning on 127. Based on feedback over the weekend, John's doing one more draft. His top priority that I imagine we all agree is his top priority is Senate Finance and 454. And so he's not available this afternoon. And so we're gonna reconnect with him tomorrow morning. To work on that and maybe vote, maybe not. I'm gonna stop promising votes on that bill. But we will warn a vote for tomorrow. And so if folks are ready, we'll go for it. And then this afternoon, we have two sort of loose ends of sorts. The budget bill on the Senate side had some attorney general fees that we never had a chance to look at or work on. And so the AG's office is here to share that with us. It's already, the conferees have already shaken hands, floor vote, but wanted to make sure we did due diligence, better late than never. And then S51, members for the Committee of Conference have been named. Likely, we will not meet this because 454 is in Senate Finance, and I would rather leave them to focus on that for this week until they're done. But wanted to get some testimony about the caregiver credit from Department of Taxes, just so that conferees are prepared, but also it's really good for all of us to hear all of that. So we can all be on the conference committee conversation together. Which gives me a moment for just a tiny bit of like Committee of Conference housekeeping. We're likely going to have 3 or 4 bills in a Committee of Conference. It's really hard to keep the committee informed of the Committee of Conference doings. Will very much do my best. As a human, I definitely like the more stressed I get, the less I communicate. That's like something I know about myself and I'm working on as a person, but really like encourage folks to go to any of the conferees. And then we'll try to have like we meet once a day at least to update folks on where we are in those committees of conference. And of course, encourage you all to like come and watch and do all the things too, but we can have a committee discussion about those committees of conference each day as we proceed. And if any of you have been here longer than I, or just in different, if you have any advice on how you've seen a committee and a committee of conference be in a good circle together, please let me know. Because I feel like it's one of those places that committees tend to get a little stressed around and want to make sure that we're representing you all well. So with that, H493. Oh, sorry. No. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Either one of you wants to talk. Fine.
I would just, if you have an idea of a preview of what bills might end up in a committee.
Oh, yeah, that would be helpful, huh? I imagine that 127 is going to wind up a committee of conference. I promise that 454 is going to wind up at a committee of conference. And we already have a committee of conference for 51. And I feel like there's a fourth one that I lost somewhere, but I don't know what it is.
That's 51. Yes.
I just said that. That's the third one.
Okay.
Maybe there's only 3. Yeah.
Okay.
You take down the target there
Okay.
and put up just little notes on committees.
On where we are. That's great. Thank you. Yeah. And there's probably about 5 more bills that are still making their ways out of committee that have to come through here before we adjourn. And don't ask me to name those because I don't remember what they are. They're like somewhere deep in my email. But I think we're going to cover most of them this week, except the DMV bill probably won't be until next week.
When are we going to see the next draft of S127?
Either this afternoon or tomorrow morning, depending on John's experience in Senate Finance. Yes,
You ask for advice or whatever.
let's do that later
Okay.
and get to Todd. Okay. Okay, thanks. Would you like to join us? Thanks.
Good afternoon, folks. Todd Delos from the Attorney General's office, here to speak on the fee portion of the big bill, and I want to just start by apologizing. Our office had put this fee recommendation in. It was added to the governor's rec, and through communication between me and our finance director, we believed we were moving it along appropriately, and it was at the 11th hour in the conference committee that we suddenly realized you had never heard about this. And that is our mistake, and I apologize for that and appreciate the committee's hopeful forbearance in understanding that. I think it is a fairly small matter that I'll walk through, but I did want to lead with this was our mistake. So very quickly, there are really three fees, two are connected. And the main reason we wanted to address these, well, we wanted to shore up our budget ask and make it as close to the governor's request as possible. But beyond that, when we did our fee report, our annual fee report, we noted that these fees had not been updated since the laws were initially implemented. So between 12 and 15 years, these fees had remained static. So what we did in looking at them, the first one is the prescribed products fee. It hadn't been updated since 2009 when it was fixed at $500. Just looking at, I think it's the NEPA inflation calculator. There's all we did. We took what is the 2025 value of 2009, $500, and came out with $765, which is a 53% increase. But if it were done annually, would have not been quite as dramatic, but would have landed in the same place.
700 what?
765.
And I'm happy to.
The budget language is posted if that's of any interest to anyone, and it's on page 65.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And basically, the budget language, as the chair referenced, simply adds, strikes 500 and makes it 765 for this one. I'm happy to go fee by fee or just tell you what the changes are and then go fee by fee, whichever is easier for you.
Changes and then.
So the other two fees, page, relate to paid fundraisers. So I can get into the details of what specifically those folks do. But essentially the same story, 2013, there's an annual registration fee for folks who are paid to fundraise in the state of Vermont. And that was fixed again at $500 in 2013. Through the inflationary calculator, it's bumped up to $675, 35% increase, so 500 to 675. And then for every campaign that these entities are engaged with, they pay a certain registration fee for those campaigns. That moved from $200 in 2013, again, up 35% to $270 in the big bill. So those are the changes. The total sum is about $42,000.
And what are the paid fundraisers?
So I'll go backwards. Paid fundraisers are entities that are hired. These are not the development directors that you know at your local nonprofit. These are external entities that are hired to raise money. So it just so happens that in my previous incarnation at the AG's office, I worked in this space specifically. Paid fundraisers are often hired by professional organizations or others. When we used to have landlines, these are the folks that called you in the middle of the day to tell you about the opportunity to help support. I don't want to name any charities necessarily, but suffice to say they would call to raise money. And the reason they were regulated more specifically in Vermont and elsewhere in the country, actually most states have regulations, is because they take between 25 and 90% of the donated funds for their own benefit.
Is it 20 to 95%?
I believe 90 might have been the highest. And the AG's office, certainly in the early teens, was issuing an annual report. I believe the use of paid fundraisers has largely declined. I think that's in part because of cell phones, but I think it's in part because there are ways around it. I could go on about paid fundraisers for a while. It's an interesting area. There are certain, I will just for 1 minute if I may.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of those walk campaigns, right, or bike riding campaigns, those are also paid fundraisers, and they do an amazing amount of, it's a similar split, but they do an amazing amount of fundraising and some of the tangential benefits. And a lot of very reputable charities here in Vermont will say we hire them once every 5 years or 10 years, really to grow the list And then we take the list back and do our own fundraising. So I don't want to make it sound like they're just stealing the money. There are a lot of cost benefits to it. State entities that are registering across the country in lots of different states for lots of different reasons. And these fees simply pay for the investigation and enforcement that happens around paid fundraisers. Prescribed products. This is what used to be known as the gift ban law in Vermont. So this is about medical device companies, by and large. It's not about providers. It's about the companies that make the product, the prescribed product, devices and pharmaceuticals, I believe. If they give any gifts of any value to providers, they have to report. So just to make it very clear, it's not about the doctors, the nurses, any of our providers. It's about the folks who then are bringing those products in. I think it was a pretty significant issue for the legislature in the aughts. And then continued to be a significant issue. And actually the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, touched on some of this as well. So we continue to do some enforcement in this space, and that's what this should be based on.
So it's gifts for folks who work places that might buy or prescribe those products. Okay.
Precisely. And this, I mean, Vermont was a leader.
Range from like pens to cruises.
So
Okay.
I don't know as folks are reporting on the individual bagel level, but I do think they do report on the junket.
Okay. Thanks. Any questions for? Okay, thank
So
you.
there's-
Yeah,
Just these are all existing fees, just modest increases in each one of them.
Modest, had we done it annually, yes. If the number on the piece of paper looks large, but absolutely. The total amount is not, we don't anticipate it being particularly significant either.
and Chris will talk us through sort of the standard format of this was last year, this was updated, and then this is the cost of living here.
The last one that you mentioned, how much was their fee?
So with the paid fundraisers, there are two fees. There's a registration, I'm going to fundraise in Vermont. That fee went from $500 to $675. And then for every campaign that paid fundraiser operates, they pay it was $200 and it would become $270 fee.
Okay, the doctor who receives a toaster, he doesn't have to report anything.
Not based on this law. That requirement where the prescribed products come in is the giver of the toaster. The provider of the toaster.
That's a good way to think of it.
The provider of the toaster representative will come to do
Say,
something.
what if he gets an airplane, but I won't, but.
For now.
Did we ever discuss as a body, I mean, there are other agencies that have not had fee requests since the early 2000s, and I think that increasing them with inflation is a reasonable standard. But it occurs to me that there may be some agencies that have quite significant revenue shortfalls because they haven't been allowed to request increases.
So we haven't, last year, we spent a great deal of time on this and perhaps folks remember all of that. And we now have a system where the administration and JFO sort of are doing internal fee reports every year. And then it's a decision for whether or not we're going to pick those up and move them essentially. But we now receive that data every year, and JFO and the administration have really improved. TED actually has really improved that process with the administration. So we really have all the information we need when we begin those conversations. This year, it's a fairly tedious process to do it for a full agency. And it didn't seem that we had time this year to take that on, but we can have a conversation about it. Maybe if we have some extra time in the next few weeks or at the beginning of next session to figure out what comes next. And our sort of next up on the list. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
And it's particularly fun to work on because Representative Brannigan has a special place in her heart.
It always makes sense.
Yeah. Chris, would you like to join us? Thanks.
Everyone. Chris Troop, Joint Fiscal. I have very little to add to that excellent overview, but there is a quick one pager that I'll just show you all that It's going to be posted on the committee webpage under my name for today's date. So as you heard from the Attorney General's office, these three fees are expected to generate roughly $42,000 of additional revenue to the miscellaneous special revenue fund that helps support their budget in FY '26. So the Senate added this language. You'll see it in E 200.1 and E 200.2 of the budget. And that's where you'll see these fee adjustments. You'll see that this is based on data from the Attorney General's office that they submitted through the process that your chair just described to us in the most recent cycle of fee reports, that those paid fundraiser fees, approximately 16 units annually for the annual registration and around 100 units annually on the notice of solicitation filings. Then the manufacturers of prescribed products, gift expenditure disclosures. That's a mouthful. There's approximately 120 units of those submitted annually. The paid fundraiser fees, those first two were last adjusted in 2013. So this adjustment represents a 35% inflationary increase. And then the other one on that, disclosures for the manufacturers of prescribed products that had not been adjusted since 2009. And so that's I believe a 53% inflationary increase since then, because I don't know if this fee had ever been adjusted since it was first created. So that's it. You probably wouldn't know what this is when you look at the language in the budget, because you're kind of changing some numbers and it's like, wait a minute, what are we actually changing here? But you'll see now that you have a little bit of context, that if you cross-reference those sections in statute, you'll see the full list of how this works, what triggers payment of the fee, and so on and so forth. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, but
Do you have any idea how they track the number of paid fundraisers aside from somebody who files a form and says, I intend to do this?
I do not. That might be a great question for the Attorney General's office, but I do not know.
Because I still have a landline and I swear I get more than 16 different companies telling me that.
Are they all from people?
That, well, yes, when they say they're a paid caller, it is a person.
Zero certification.
And I swear it's more than 16 different entities.
Yes.
I don't know if we're ready, but I'm prepared to show of hands.
Oh, we don't need to, it's like the course is,
General support, man.
thank you, great. Whether we support it or not seems sort of irrelevant at this point. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew it happened. Yeah,
Okay,
this is an opportunity for the AG's office to kindly apologize to us and for us to all know what happened.
And we continue to appreciate that.
Yes.
Anytime you read all this offline.
Okay.
I would love to.
Thank you, Chris.